Okay, we're going to start the shiur. This is the shiur on what I would call Shabbos HaGadol, Parshas Tzav, but it's going to be bigger the Shabbos HaGadol drasha that I will say in my shul, Amir Tashem, on Shabbos. So today, now I'm taping this, is Thursday noontime, and it'll be in the sugya of Afikoman. Next week, which will be Erev Pesach, I don't think I'll have a shiur out, but the Chol HaMoed, I will try to produce a shiur, so I won't miss next week. Chol HaMoed, I'll have a shiur in the Mir Tashem. From after that, I'll try to say Kimidei Shabbos B'Shabbos, the regular shiur, which is to be kosher to the sugyas of the parsha, the haftarah. It could be after Chol HaMoed, I'll say on Sfiras HaOmer, being the sugyas Sfiras HaOmer, halacha, maybe a different bit of agada. I'll call upon him. Talking now about the inyan of Afikoman. The sugi of Afikoman, Be'ikr, is based on a Gemara, that the Gemara says, Ein maftirin, the Mishnah says, in Daf Kuf Yutes Amid Beis, in Masechet Pesachim, Ein maftirin achar Pesach Afikoman. We aren't mafter achar Pesach, what's called Afikoman. There are two pirushim in the Gemara. I'm going to go with the pirush in the Gemara, and that's both pirushim in Niftik La'alacha. One is you shouldn't eat the Pesach in Shtei Mekoimos, who did matzah. Then there's another pirush is that we shouldn't eat other things after we eat what we call the Afikoman. The words Afikoman has different pirushim in the Rishonim. In Labadafka, it's referring to the matzah. It might be referring to we don't eat after the matzah other things, but we give it the matzah the name Afikoman, and there are those Mefarshim who try to explain why we call that the Afikoman. But we refer to the matzah we eat after the Suda's Afikoman, and there's a nidun in the Rishonim, a machlokes Rashi or Rashbam with the Rosh and the Torah. Paskins like the Rosh. Rashi and Rashbam holds that in the Seder of the Haggadah, even though we have first, after Magid, matzah, we have mar, we have korech, then we eat the Suda. The Afikoman that we eat afterwards is the Iker matzah, or Yotza, the Iker mitzvah matzah. There's a dimyan to this, to Achilas Marar, that if when we have the Tibul Rishon, we would use Marar, and then we have Marar later on after Matzah. The Marar Hasheni is the Iker Mitzvah Marar, and the Marar Rishon is just Kadesh Yish'olo Atinoikis, we have Shtei Tibulim. It's doing a little bit to Tekiyas, the Chazal and Besakim, what we call Tekiyas the Meyushav, the Tekiyas that we do before Shemana Esrei, and the Tekiyas the Me'umad, the Tekiyas we do in middle Shemana Esrei, Chazar Sashatz, but there are two Tekiyas, and some Rishonim hold the Iker Tekiyas is the Tekiyas the Me'umad. Maybe when it comes to Rosh Hashanah time, we'll discuss those sugyas, what we call Tekiyas the Me'umad, Tekiyas the Meyushav, and Tekiyas the Me'umad. Without kol panim, Shittas Rashi is, and that Shittas Rashbam, and the Rosh brings it down. Toisus brings down this possibility, brings down the shitah. It seems like Toisus is not machriya. That's how there seems to be the achronim one of the Toisus, but brings down this side that the Iker mitzvah of matzah is an Afikoman, and that's when we have to mechaven losses mitzvah matzah. The Mishnah Berurah, we'll talk about it soon when he talks about the halacha that by matzah, haseva is ma'akev, and by achilas matzah, if we weren't mesa, we eat matzah again. The Mishnah Berurah seems to say, but according to Rashi, by Afikoman, that's the ikar mitzvah of matzah. So then we have to go ahead and do haseva again by Afikoman. That's what the Mishnah Berurah says in Simon Taf Ayin Zayin, in the Shar Tzion, I think, Sifkat and Dalet Hey, that's what the Mishnah Berurah mentions. I'll leave it to Rashi. Shittas Rosh is that it's only Zecher Korban Pesach. And since it's a Zecher Korban Pesach, so therefore Shittas Rosh is that that's not the Iker of the mitzvah. The Iker of the mitzvah is matzah, the doraisa of matzah, which we pass the matzah b'zman zeh doraisa, we yoytze with the matzah we eat after Magid. So Magid, we say the first half of Halal, and now we eat the matzah. That matzah is going to be the Doraisa. There's another matzah that we eat Afikoman, which the Rosh explains is Zecher Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach was Nechel B'Achrayna. Remember, we have a matzah, because we don't have Korban Pesach with Ranenu, so we have matzah b'mokum the Korban, and that's Zecher Pesach, and that's not more Zecher Pesach. The Lashon of the Shulchan Aruch with the Torah's Lashon is that on Afikoman, what we call Afikoman, Ein Mevarchim Alav. We don't make a bracha. So the Lavush explains the reason we don't make a bracha is because it's Zecher LePesach. It's a Zecher Ba'alma, and this Zecher Ba'alma, Chazal wasn't masaking a bracha. Meaning you go to that tzad that just like the Korban Pesach has a bracha, so that the Zecher LeKorban Pesach has a bracha. Kamash Malon, the Zecher doesn't have a bracha. But at Dekach, you need to have an explanation. Because you have an Achilas Matzah that you made a bracha of Al Achilas Matzah. And now we have Achilas Matzah that's Zecher Korban Pesach. You'd have a Havamina, there's a bracha on Afikoman. And I don't think the bracha that you'd have a Havamina, a Liba, the Rosh, that it's Zecher Pesach, would be the Nusach of bracha of Al Achilas Matzah to Mevarch it again. Would be Al Achilas Afikoman, Al Achilas Zecher Pesach, something of that nature. Kamash Malon, such a Zecher doesn't have a bracha. That's what the Lavush explains, Aliba Darash. The question would be, what would be according to Rashi? Rashi, would there be a makom to have another bracha? No. Rashi himself says, or Rashbam, Rashi. The Rashbam says clearly, based on the Gemara, is we made the bracha of Al Achilas Matzah in the beginning of the first achila of Achilas Matzah that we said I came after Magid, even though that's the Iker, but that's where we made the bracha. That bracha is koi even on the soif of the Afikoman. So the reason I'm a bracha is because it goes on the soif on the Afikoman. Agav, here would come up an interesting another shaila. If the bracha, if you hold Afikoman is not mechuyv in the bracha, the open it's only Zecher LePesach, so then there's no inyan that you shouldn't be mafsik binyanan macherim from the bracha of Al Achilas Matzah you make b'rishayna on the Afikoman. There would be no such inyan. But if you hold like Rashi and Rashi Rashbam, that their shitah is that the Iker Kilu, the Iker Kavana is that to be yoytze, the Iker mitzvah matzah with the Achila of Afikoman, then l'ch'oira, you're being soymech on the bracha you made at the beginning, right after Magid, the Achilas Matzah for the end. So l'chari, you should be careful not to be mafsik. B'sicha yisera. Any sicha that's not nogeya, minyane achilo, minyane asuda. That's the chara would have a makor. And v'chein muva b'shla kodesh. B'shla kodesh is brought down that you shouldn't go ahead and be mafsik b'sicha from the beginning of the Al Achilas Matzah till the end of Afikoman. And he says because the bracha that you made on the Achilas Matzah is koin Afikoman. So you should be mafsik b'sicha. That's not minyane deyoyma, minyane de. So if you're talking about the mitzvahs, or about the what you need l'tzarchei achila, so that's kiyum the mitzvah. Or you're talking about tzibur mitzrayim, it's lechem sha'inu ladvar m'harvei. That's a chelik of the mitzvahs matzah. Fine, but stam sicha and yanim acherim, that you shouldn't be oisik in Milah Suda. That's what the Shalach Kodesh says. I did see Poiskim by name who said we're not choishes for Shalach Kodesh. Number one is me'ikar adin. We paskin like the Rosh. That's how the Mishabur paskins. The Mishabur clearly paskins. That's the pashtus of the Shulchan Aruch, the Torah that we paskin like the Rosh. That's the pasha. Therefore, the ikar is that the bracha on Achilas Matzah is only on Achilas Matzah. Afikoman has no chiyuv bracha whatsoever, and therefore you don't have to be worried about this hefsek. We do have a halacha that the Achilas Matzah is even under koirech because they mikdashil, and there you shouldn't be mafsek elam minyanim that are nogeya to the having the koirech. More than that, not. But the But to be worried about mafsek and afikomen, we don't worry. The Maisa, the Mishabur does bring down as a tzad shitas Rashi. Ikar, then we pass on like the other shitas. But he does bring down a shitas Rashi. But it's not a dover, it's ma'akiv in the mitzvah. Even by, for example, tkiyas shofar, they're not supposed to be mafsek from the beginning of the tkiyas to the end of the tkiyas, at the end after Musaf, even there, it's a din because the bracha is called, you shouldn't be mafsek. But it's not a bracha levatala, it doesn't create a bracha levatala. They're not supposed to be mafsek. It's based on a rif in Masechta Rosh Hashanah, and it's nifsek halacha by any mitzvah that the mitzvah nimsheches, even if it's chal the bracha on the mitzvah that you made in the beginning, but you're not supposed to be mafsek till you finish the mitzvah. But it's not ma'akiv. So therefore, there are those who say that Chazal wouldn't have been misakin this surah of having a hefsek ad kidei kach where it's built the efshari, like a lo nitnu Torah l'malachei hasharis. So I saw the poskim as manenu say that we're not noihig lahachmer, but beinyan zeh nishla kadosh. That's but it's an interesting thing which should come out of machlokes between, like we said, the Rosh and Rashi. Rashi, Rashbam, the whole Zecher is the Afikoman, the Bracha that you made in halachos matzah Afikoman, or if you hold like the Rosh that there is no Bracha on Afikoman because Afikoman is only Zecher to the Pesach. I want to get really be'ikr to shitas Rambam, but we have to be masader the shitas Rishonim, the ikr machlokes Rishonim, and then we'll get to shitas Rambam. There is just one other point. I keep on mentioning that the Rosh holds that the Afikoman is Zecher lePesach. And since the Zecher lePesach is Zecher Ba'alma, doesn't have a bracha, that's how the Levush explains this halacha. The Rashbam, Beferish Rashi, Rashbam says that the inyan of matzah that's by Afikoman is kineged the matzah that was Bizman Migdash that was Nechel im Korban Pesach. And this is Shitas Rashi. It's Beferish, Rashbam, that the Bizman Migdash, al matzah mar miyochlu means you ate it together. The matzah you ate together with the Korban Pesach. So Chazal made it that we should have an Afikoman Bizman Achilas Korban Pesach, a Zecher to the matzah that was Nechel in the Korban Pesach. And since the Korban Pesach was Nechel b'soif, so therefore we have a matzah that's b'soif. On that, Rashi holds that's the Iker. And Libi Armeli doesn't explain it, but just to speak out that it's Lefi Shitos, and the Rosh learns it's a Zecher to Korban Pesach. It's not matzah dik, it's Korban Pesach dik. B'mokum the Korban Pesach, we eat the matzah b'acharena, b'mokum the Korban Pesach. So you had the matzah, which is B'tchila, that's the Iker mitzvah of matzah. And then we have Kineged, Korban Pesach, we have another Achilas matzah. But that's like a kom tachtav of the Doraisa that was Bizman Migdash of Korban Pesach. But according to Rashi Rashbam, it's not connected to the Korban Pesach, it's connected to the matzah hanechel in Pesach. Just Bizmanenu, we don't eat matzah in Pesach, but we want to eat a matzah b'dugmas that we ate the matzah Bizman Abayis, which was Bizman that we ate matzah im HaPesach. So therefore Chazal said, okay, but it's a matzah dikah, it's the halach of matzah. Matzah that was Bizman Migdash was Nechel im Korban Pesach. We want to eat that surah now. So therefore Chazal said, Iker, matzah is the matzah we eat b'acharena. That's the Iker matzah. Oh, the question, why do we have a matzah also in the beginning? Okay, that's how the Chazal Masader, they wanted you to have a matzah that's Nechel Te'avon. And that's all the dinim, and that's one of the, it's a question on Rashi, if the Iker matzah is b'soif, where is this all the dinim in the beginning of Rib Pesachim that you're supposed to eat matzah Te'avon, you shouldn't eat Erev Pesach, you're not supposed to eat Erev Pesach, Samach Lemincha, you're not supposed to eat Mishum Da'echel matzah Te'avon. According to Rashi, the Iker matzah we eat is b'soif, which were Nechel ala soiva. We were eating a lehepech, not Te'avon, ala soiva. So how does that work? So that's a Kushas ha'achroinim on Shitas Rashi. Okay, that we're not going to come to answer today, but that's a ha'ara. But akopanim, when we talk about this shitah, is that Rashi, if you shitas keged matzah nechum pesach, therefore we're misaken that our matzah we bizmanelu should be The ke'ein, the matzah is Nechum Korban Pesach, that should be b'lachroina. While according to the Rosh that it's not connected the matzah Nechum Pesach, connected the Pesach itself. L'hepech. You had the ikr daraisa the gedin of yoyotze the mitzvah matzah b'tchila after magid, after chatzi halo magid, yoyotze your achilas matzah daraisa, and then we have a separate achilas matzah that's really not matzah dik. It's really Korban Pesach dik. It's really shaykh to become tachas the Korban Pesach. That's what I would think. How to go ahead and masada the shitas Rashi Rashbam mul the Rosh, which is be'ikr dim, like I said, we pass it like the Rosh, but the Mishabur himself in Shartin does bring down like a tzad lachshresh Rashi and Rashbam, and the Aruch HaShulchan, being that he learns in shitas Rambam also like Rashi Rashbam, so he also says that we should be choshesh more, not just chashash ba'alma, but it's an ikr shita also. That's what the Aruch HaShulchan says. There's a big Chiddush in the Magen Avraham. The Maharal brings down that we should eat by the Afikoman 2 kezaysim. 2 kezaysim, a shiur kebetza. So there are some who have the meaning to say not say kebetza, could say kebeya. I say kebetza all the time because it's brought down in the Sefer Iyayam, who was a boy based midrash al Gra. He writes there that he asked the sons of the Gra, how would the Gra noig? And he said the Gra, he said Mesechtas Beitza. It was no problem saying Beitza. So therefore, I'm going to say Beitza all the time. Okay, alcohol. That's not the noise that we're talking about, but alcohol upon him. You eat a shiur Beitza, not a shiur of kezayis, because the Magen Avraham says kineged these 2 shitas. One shitah Zecher Pesach, one shitah Zecher matzah shenelchum Pesach. So therefore, we should eat 2 kezaysim. That's what the Magen Avraham brings down. It's really from the Bach. The Bach brings down this. That's the nusach of the Bach. The shitah, the Makor Advarim, the Maharal says a different svara, and the Bach is doiche svara. He says we should eat a shiur achila sheyesh bo svia. And the Gemara says, and the shiur achila sheyesh bo svia, and Mesachas brachos is a shiur of a beitza. And the reason being is we should show our chavivus to the mitzvah, that we want to be saveya from, we eat a shiur of achila kedei svia. So the chavivus for the mitzvah of matzah, or afikomen akol ponim. So that would be good work lehepech. If you hold like Rashi, there would be understand that there's a chavivus, a mitzvah of this mitzvah alone, because this is the ikar mitzvah of matzah. But okay. But the chiddush that you have a Zecher matzah and Zecher Pesach at the same time is the chara chiddush, because it's a machlokes rishonim, and according to one rishon, it is Zecher matzah, and according to one rishon, it's Zecher Pesach. But each rishon holds it's Zecher matzah or Zecher Pesach, but no one holds both. And lehepech, that gufa part of the machlokes is what the ikar is or not. But it's a dvar chiddush, and that's how the Mishabur brings it down. The beginning of Taf Ayin Zayin, the Mishabur Sivkat Nala brings down this Magen Avraham that you should have 2 kezaysim. I'm not damning here the shaila if we should be choshesh v'niskat no shiurim, and therefore we should always have double size shiur because we're choshesh that maybe it was niskat no shiurim, and that would only be if you hold like Rashi that this is the ikar achila, so the gavi deraisas we would be makbid. But that's another reason why you should have a shiur kebetz. I mean, you have more than the smaller shiur of kezayis, but more like the bigger shiur kezayis, which would cover the smaller shiur kebetz. So that's why these aren't so nogeya. But there's a chiddush from Shlomo Zalman. It says that even though there's sometimes a concept by Achilas matzah, it's brought down that you're supposed to eat 2 kezaysim to be yoytze a kezayis mitzad the birkas hamoitzi, a kezayis mitzad the Achilas matzah, to eat with vasacha. It's a big question. How? What? That's another noise. Maybe another year we'll talk about that. But the Afikoman, Rosh Hashanah tainas, if it's keneged, one's keneged matzah, one's keneged pesach, maybe the 2 kezaysim that you're eating is kebetza should be nechol not vasachas. You should make sure they have 1 kezayis and then have another kezayis. You definitely don't have to have 2 kezaysim b'toy k'dei achilas pras. You need each kezayis b'toy k'dei achilas pras. And this Shlomo Zalman and others bring down from Hilchos Sukkah. even though there's a mashmois from the Magen Avraham, not like that, but they say you have to explain it like that. There is no shiur of Achilas Beitza, but took the Achilas Pras. The Achilas Pras, there's shiur and Achilas kezayis. But being that we're choshish in shiur, and it's got no shiur, that's why we eat the kezayis, but took the Achilas Pras, because we're chashin, and maybe the shiur, if we're choshish for the Doraisa, Afikoman, Apishitas Rashi, then the shiur might be a bigger shiur, so therefore we need to gebetze. It's also niskat no shiur, and that's the shiur kezayis, and therefore that's why we might want to eat b'ketoy kedechilas pras. But Shlomo Zalman has this Chiddush, but the whole gidrei advarim of the Magen Avraham is a davar that's a bit of a tzarchim. Okay, that's all shittas, like we said, shittas Rashi, shittas Rashi Rashbam versus shittas Rosh Tur. And what seems to be the ikar Pesach and Shulchan Aruch, even though we found the Shartzi and this Choishes, the Aruch HaShulchan is Choishes a little bit more. What would be Shittas HaRambam? So Shittas HaRambam, I think that the Shittas HaRambam is a Shitah Miyuchedes. The Rambam askins in Hilchos Chomet Matzah Perek Ches Halacha Ches, a very interesting thing. He says, Bizman hazeh she'ein sham korban Akar shemavarach hamoitzi, choyzer mavarach al achilas matzah. You make hamoitzi lech memaretz, and you mavarach al achilas matzah. Umitavel, meaning, and you don't eat the matzah together with morer. Umitavel matzah becharoises v'oichel, and you mitavel the matzah that you're eating at the beginning of your achilas, meaning after magid, before you eat the ikar suda, you will mitavel matzah becharoises v'oichel. So the Rambam, not what we pass in Shulchan, not how we're noyeg. The Rambam holds the matzah. You're also toivel b'charoises, which is the Torah argues with the Rambam. The Rambam Mukari in Gaonim, but that's the shitah Rambam matavla matzah b'charoises v'oichel. Then uchoyzim more halachos more matavla more b'charoises, and there is no tivla b'charoises when he talks about the Afikoman, the matzah that you oichel b'charoises, the Afikoman. He doesn't say you're matavla b'charoises. Mashmois Advarim is that the ikar of the kiyum of Achilas Matzah is the kezayis Rishona. This that you are toiva matzah b'charoises, there are those who ask, already the Torah brings on the kasha, that l'choira matzah zecher l'cheres, and metabla b'charoises is zecher to the morer, so you mix Cheres and the Mariras, the Avdus together. So they deal with the kasha. I mean, already the Bach talks about it, but the Torah already asked that kasha. But if you're only metavel the matzah, the Achilas matzah, and not the Afikoman, it seems to be that the Achilas matzah, that's the ikar, is the kiyum mitzvahs matzah. So on that you have an union of darabanan and having charoises. And that's one way to learn in Shittas Rambam, that the Rambam holds like the Rosh, and he's makriya that that's the ikar, not later on. I did see someone who wanted to say on Maharal that the reason you're not by Afikoman, you don't mix it with charoises, so you don't put any charoises in, is because there's a sheer din by Afikoman that you should have the matzah, tam matzah bepiv. To have tam matzah bepiv, if you mix with charoises, be also the tam matzah bepiv. But he timed it himself. He says, minei ubei. If the din would be to have matzah b'charoises, that would be what you should have. Tam matzah with a little bit of charoises, bepiv. That would be the din of the achilas matzah together with the charoises. So that would be the din, is to have that tam bepiv. As a mela, it seems to be that the ikar is the achilas matzah. But the Rambam, when he brings down the halacha of Afikoman, the gather of Afikoman, not to eat after matzah, bismanenu. So he says this din of not to eat afterwards. He says, the Rambam says in halacha tes, a few things, we'll make a few diyukim here, and then we'll get. V'achar kach nimshach besuda v'oichel kol ma sheroitze le'echol. You're nimshach besuda, you eat what you want. V'shoitze kol ma sheroitze lishtois, which is a question. Why does the Rambam speak out? You can eat what you want. You can drink what you want. Why does he have to speak to that? Well, what's the Chiddush? There's a hava meaning you can't eat. V'achar kach nimshach besuda v'oichel v'shoitze. Fine. He wants to tell the Seder. He has to speak out. What's it necessary to tell you that? Okay, well, maybe deal with that ha'ara soon. Uba achroina, this is in the Zman HaMikdash, oichel mibsar HaPesach, you eat from the basar HaPesach, afilu kezayis, ve'enu toim achrav klal, and you don't need anything afterwards. Ubizman hazeh, oichel kezayis matzah, ve'enu toim achrer klum. Kidei, sheyehei hefsik sudasoi, the hefsik sudasoi, v'tam basar HaPesach, oy ha-matzah bepiv. You should either have tam Pesach or tam matzah bepiv, she'achiloson hi ha-mitzvah. The achila, that is the mitzvah. As a mela, the Rambam says that you have to either have tam basar bePesach, nisher bepiv, or tam matzah bepiv. That's the Gidrei Advarim, is to have tam matzah or tam Korban Pesach bepiv. And he says she'achiloson hi ha-mitzvah. That achila is the mitzvah. He ha-mitzvah. With a hey idea, that is the mitzvah. So l'chayra, from here you see that the ikar in the Rambam is bizman habayis. You didn't have matzah afikoman because there is no tam matzah bepiv when you have tam korban pesach bepiv. But after the korban habayis, Chazal is masaken that you should have tam matzah bepiv, and that should be the ikar mitzvah. Achilas and hi mitzvah, and that's the tam matzah you should have bepiv. So the mashmois advorim is in Rambam that the matzah bepiv is the matzah of afikomen is the ikar. That's the mashmois in the Rambam. And v'chein diek ha'aruch hashulchan, that's a diek from the aruch hashulchan. That's how the aruch hashulchan is medayik. That's the shitah Rambam. So there's a bit of discrepancy. What's the ikar according to the Rambam? Ikar, the Achilas matzah, which would be like shitah Rosh, that you ate at the beginning, right after Magid, or is the ikar the Afikoman and Chazal Kilur Masakin? That's where you're mekayim the ikar Achilas matzah. So this dover is a dover that's a torn a beer in shitah Rambam. There's another nidin in Achronim, a nidin between Chok Yaakov and the Eli Rabbah, which, very interesting, is a Rambam Mefurish, which is very interesting. In this Noisa, they don't bring down the Rambam. They bring the Chok Yaakov is medayik, that what would happen if a person ate after matzah something else, meaning he ate afikomen and then he ate something else. Should he go ahead and eat afikomen again? So the Chok Yaakov says no, and he's medayik from Magen Avraham. This come out of Magen Avraham Mefurish that if you ate it, you ate it. While the Eli Rabbah says no, you have to go ahead and eat the matzah again because you don't have tam matzah bepiv. That's what it says about the Mishnah Berurah. I'm just trying to remember how the Mishnah Berurah paskins. So the Mishnah Berurah paskins in Siman Taf Ayin Ches if Aleph. The Indian it says on Taf Ayin Ches Achar Afikomen that we refer to this matzah b'chenes Afikomen Ein Lechel Shum Davar. It says the Mishnah Berurah in Sifkat Aleph Kadesh Lo Yavru Mepiv Tam Matzah Shal Afikomen Shehu Mitzvah Aidei Shehu Mitzvah Aidei Tam Oiso Meichel Ubedi Evet Im Ochol Achav Shum Davar Yachzer V'yoyichel Kezayis Matzah Shmur L'Shem Afikomen. If you ate afterwards, you should go ahead and eat again matzah l'shem afikomen. Those are machalik if it's before you birkas hamazon and after birkas hamazon. Because if it's before birkas hamazon, you have a real. If it's after birkas hamazon, you have a real problem because you're not supposed to be oichel afikomen pamayim. It's not befeirish like that, but there are some achronim who hold like that, and they hold only time to be machmer is only if it's before we did birkas hamazon. So then there's a malkum to go ahead and be machmer, but if it's after birkas hamazon, not. So the Mishnah Berurah says befeirish in Chartzion that this is Eli Rabbah, not Chok Yaakov. But both Eli Rabbah and Chok Yaakov, what I recall, they don't bring the Rambam. It's a Rambam Mefurish. The Rambam in Perek Vav, Halacha Yud Aleph, when he's not damming the Seder of Leil Pesach, he's damming Hilchos Matzah, the halachos of Matzah. He says in Perek Vav, Halacha Yud Aleph, Midivei Soifrim Sheim Aftirim Achar Matzah Klum. He says Afilu Klois, Ve'goizim Koyoytzim, nothing. Ela Afal Pisha Ochel Matzah. If you ate matzah, v'ochel achrei ma'acholos acherus u'perus ha'kayoyte ben. If you ate matzah, even though you ate matzah, but if you ate after other macholos, choyzer v'ochel kezayis matzah ba'achrei u'poisek. You would go ahead and eat another kezayis matzah u'poisek. And the davar, this din that the Rambam, the Mishabur passes like it, and Mekore in the Rambam, is a davar that needs a beer. What is the reasoning in the Rishonim for this halacha of to be oichel kezayis matzah ba'achroina? So many of the Rishonim learn up the Rashbam. Pesach nechal al soive. That's why Pesach is like that. And Zecher to the matzah nechal in Pesach, that the matzah also was nechal b'soive. So we have this din by matzah that should be oichel al soive. And if the din would be that you can eat afterwards, you wouldn't be eating. Maybe you're not going to eat the Pesach al soive, knowing that you can eat afterwards. But if you know that now I can't eat anything else, so you're going to make sure that you're oichel enough food that you won't be hungry later on. So therefore, it's a preventive measure of possibly not having the Pesach and also the matzah that's nechal Pesach, bisman habayis, not being nechal al soiva. So we say you can't eat afterwards. Or there's a tam that's brought down that we're chayshinin for shviras ha'etzem. You might come to be shoyver the etzem, the atzamos, which is an iser, that you're not allowed to be shoyver the atzamos of the Korban Pesach. So therefore, Chazal wanted that you should be full, that you're not going to have a reasoning that you want to be shoyver the atzamos to eat from the marrow and the atzamos, the moyach of the atzamos. So therefore, the Chazal want, and the Rambam says in Lachamas who adin lagabe the matzah hanechal that we made the similar din. Okay, that's what he says. Maybe because it's Zecher Pesach and the Rambam, but who adin the matzah that's nechal b'makom. There was nechal the Pesach. We made a din shviras ha'etzem. Chash kilu misaken dumya the migdash that we should be nechal also because you shouldn't have shviras ha'etzem. So Chazal said you shouldn't be oichel achav klum. You shouldn't be oichel achav klum. So therefore you're going to be eat ala soiva, and therefore you won't have a chash shviras ha'etzem. All those are not midime hamatzah. Those are because Pesach nechal hasoive, matzah nechal imoy should be oichel hasoive. So you shouldn't be oichel achav klum. It's like an iser. Don't be oichel achav klum that you should come to be oichel hasoive. Don't eat afterwards. If you're going to eat, allowed to eat afterwards, you might come not to eat enough, and you might come to shviras ha'etzem. Those are like isurim that come afterwards. To say that's midine ha'achilas matzah is very hard to say. And the Rambam says over here, beferish, that you have to go ahead and be oichel oidpam. And he says it in Hilchos Matzah, that's medine ha'matzah. So it's not just an iser to do afterwards. If you did the iser, you did the iser. So you're over al divrei soifrim. So you're over al divrei soifrim. To be oichel achar Pesach, you're over al divrei soifrim. But according to the Rambam, not only you over divrei soifrim, ella, you have to go ahead and eat again. Ki'ilu, it takes away your Achilas Afikoman. And that's hard to feed these timing that were like Yisum that came afterwards. Also, even if you say it's Medine HaMatzah, but when you ate the matzah of Afikoman, you yoy to the mitzvah. So how can it be afterwards that you don't have Tamatzah Bepiv, that is a Megareya, that takes away? Well, what's it taking away? You're Mekayim the mitzvah already. How does it help to eat again? You already did the mitzvah of Afikoman. So you did with Chazal was matel alecha. So what does it help to eat again to have tam matzah? You have tam matzah, not of tam matzah of mitzvah. So what type of tam matzah is that? So Mikol Holland, from all this, I want to say over a Yisoid. Mikoroi already is in the Maharal. Maharal in the Sefer Gurus Hashem, Perek Mem Ches, says this Chiddush. The Maharal himself says it in the Rambam, and they're medaik from the Rambam. The Maharal says this Yisoid, and also I saw it in Avraham B'noi Shel Hagra, and it's Yadua in a few places, the Nitziv, and it's Pirush L'Shiltis, and Emek Sheila, in Chuvas Meshiv Dover, and in his Pirush Agada, in more than one place, he says this Yisoid, that the mitzvah of Achilas Matzah, your Mekayim Kol Achilu that you do below Pesach. every Achilas matzah you do below Pesach, you're Mekayim mitzvah Achilas matzah. Just what is that besides the Achilas matzah that you do Leil Pesach with the kezayis, you yoyti yedei choiva, but the mitzvah is to be oichel matzah Leil Pesach. That's the mitzvah. So the medayik from the Rambam says, in Perek Vav halach aleph mitzvah says in the Torah le'echol matzah below chamisha asar shenemar be'erev toichlu matzos b'chol makom b'chol zman. And at the end he says b'shar regel it's a reshus ava belel chamisha asar bovad choiva u'misha'ol kezayis yati yedei choiva. So it's a choiva, and you yati yedei choiva with the kezayis rishayna, but there's a mitzvah essay the whole zman. There's a mitzvah essay le'echol matzah belel chamisha asar. The choiva your yoitza with the kezayis rishayna. I've said before, I did say one of my first shiurim I said was on haseva in Parshas Beshalach. I spoke about the inyan of haseva belel Pesach. The Rambam has a very interesting nusach in haseva. He says v'shar achilas v'shtiyasim heisav harezim meshubach v'im lav eino tzarich. And I asked there, what's it mean v'lav eino tzarich? I thought to say that since there's a mitzvah, he's referring to the ma'isa mitzvah achilas matzah, and shti of halachos is a mitzvah to be oichel kol hazman. I think I'd mentioned that before. And the mitzvah to be shoyse kol hazman. V'im lav netzarich, you might think you have to, even that you have to eat again if you didn't do a seva. V'im lav, if you weren't meisav, and netzarich le'echol od pam to mekayim, that mitzvah that you missed out in, even though you didn't have to, but if it's a mitzvah you missed out, you might have to go ahead and do it again. Okay, it's a dvar chiddush. It's not bakol panim. Every kezayis you eat is part of the mitzvah achilas matzah. The choiva you're makayim with the first kezayis. Shitah Rambam, if the fee says very good, hafla the fella. Avad and the kezayis you're trying to eat, you yoy to the mitzvah achilas matzah, and you didn't need to have charoises except a kezayis matzah. Whenever you makayim the choiva, that you need to have a kezayis with charoises. That's chazal's takana of matzah with charoises. Okay? That's shittas Rambam legavei matzah with charoises. But says the Rambam, but there's another mitzvah, Afikoman. The whole Afikoman's purpose is she had tam matzah bepiv. That's Afikoman's purpose. It's very interesting. The Rambam, when he talks about Korban Pesach, and the Rambam has a shitah miyuchedet even by Korban Pesach bizman habayis. He says first, when you go ahead and you bizman habayis, you machshir the shulchan lefanav, and you say Pesach Zecher magbia, and then the Rambam says what you do is you mevarech hashik yitzonu tzvon al Achilas Afikoman, and you eat from the chagigas arbosar. And then you make a bracha al Achilas Pesach ve'oichel megufa shel Pesach. That you did before you ate the whole suda. Before you ate your whole suda, you do that. So you ate matzah, you ate Korban Pesach already before the suda. Then the Rambam says, "V'achach nimshach besuda v'oichel kol ma sheroitze lechol v'shoyse kol ma sheroitze lishtos." I dafka ask, what's the Rambam saying there? But then he says, "U'ba'achroina oichel mebsar Pesach ve'ein toim achav klal." You're already yoyte mitzvah achilas Korban Pesach. What's this? Eating another Korban Pesach? Bishop Afikoman, we says Mesukin connect Korban Pesach. But if I Korban Pesach, you're already yoytze lefi the Rambam before you ikar seuda. So what are you eating Korban Pesach again? Let's mashma that you ate the Korban Pesach for this purpose, that it should be eimin toim achav klum. In Korban Pesach is the dumi the matzah also. I mean the mitzvah achilas laila leil Pesach. Everything you eat Korban Pesach matzah. V'hu did more pashtus, but more you can dine on because maybe you're eating with a mashumar. That's another noisa, the gidrim, the geder, the mitzvah achilas morim. But upon the matzah korban pesach, I spoke about shtiyas dalakos. Also could be the same thing in shittas Rambam, that your yoytza, those mitzvahs, more your shoytza, more you eat, Makai more mitzvah of that, more of that mitzvah. So therefore, the whole inyan of Korban Pesach that you eat afterwards is that you should have tam Pesach Bepiv. She'achilasan hi mitzvah. The achilasan is the mitzvah. Whether it's Achilas Pesach, that is the mitzvah. The ikr of the seder is al ha-pesach. The ikr of the seder bisman after chobanoi ze al ha-matzah. And not to be marich here, but there's an arichas gadol in the tziv in the zakdama that the ikr of the seder bisman habayis is different than the ikr of the seder shaloi bisman habayis. And that's for another time to talk about, maybe next week, maybe another year if we continue with the shiur and Mr. Hashem. But it says you eat matzah shaloi bisman habayis hi ha-mitzvah. It's the same mitzvah that you with the kezayis rishonim. You continue with all the matzah eating later on, with the matzah milda suda, the matzah eat later on. It's the same mitzvah. Just your yoytze, your choiva with kezayis rishonim. But it's the same mitzvah be'erev toichlu matzahs. So therefore you eat afterwards a kezayis. You eat afterwards a kezayis. You should have tam matzah bepiv, because achilas and hi mitzvah. It's not clear what the gidrei advarim is to have the tam matzah bepiv, because achilas and hi mitzvah. But tam matzah has what to do with the achila. We'll have to see why. And I'm going to mention here a pshat from the Ritva, and it's also about from the Abu Dram, the gidrei advarim in that. But therefore works out very good, so that the you yoytze your choy with the kezayis rishonim. So Chazal only misaken charoises can negate that. Haseva kezayis rishonim. There's no haseva because it's not a separate takana. The takana is to have tam matzah bepiv. So therefore you should be oichol matzah to have tam matzah bepiv. So that's not to have charoises. You don't need that, because the ikr of the takana is to have tam matzah bepiv. So what do you have? You have an achila to have tam matzah bepiv. And if you weren't Mekai, they didn't tam matzah bepiv because you ate something else afterwards, you eat another kezayis, because that was the Achilas Afikoman, to do an achila to have tam matzah bepiv. So if you messed up the tam matzah bepiv with the last kezayis of the Afikoman, you have to eat another kezayis, and it's the same mitzvah. The mitzvah is every kezayis you're mekayim the mitzvah, but the mitzvah is to have an achila that's nishra, the tam matzah. So if you mess up the achila of tam matzah bepiv, it's not a davar noisav. That is the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to have an achila that you nishra with tam matzah bepiv. That seems to be shitas Rambam. And be'emes, the Maharal in Gvuras Hashem, when he deals with the sugya of Afikoman and tam matzah, he says the loik as far as that the Indian of tam matzah shiur sa'etzem pasal nachalasoiva, there's a din misuyemes to have tam matzah bepiv. And the little that I saw in the Maharal, I didn't find him to mavar the tam hadavar. But there's a tam bifnei atzmo to have tam matzah bepiv. There's a siba bifnei atzmo, not mishum this timing that the Rishonim say Pesach alasoy v'shvir sa'etzem. That's why it's supposed to have tam matzah bepiv. And lefi dvarenu and shitas Rambam, that is the ikr takam of Afikoman. You did it with Basar Pesach, that you're yoytze the mitzvah, but there was another achila you did after the Basar Pesach, which is you had tam Pesach bepiv, huadim, you have tam matzah bepiv. And I'm reciting here, it's a little bit long than I normally say. I don't want to be marked too much longer. There's a lot to talk about in Divrei Haggadah around this, but the Rambam, the Ritva wrote we have printed a Ritva, the Bir Haggadah Shal Pesach, but the Ritva writes, and again we know that the Chacham, when he was showing the She'ela, and the answer was up to Eim Aftinachar Pesach Afikomen. And many talk about what exactly is the answer to the question. But the Rambam, the Ritva says over here when he says in Mitoich the Dvarim, he says the Eim Aftinach Pesach, he says he says in the beginning, then he says further, the gamla fi she'en lanu le'echol shum davar achrav kidei she'yishar tamoi befinu umitoich hatam naskir tamei hamitzvah. So we have the tam matzah bepiv we'll remember to talk about Tamei HaMitzvahs, when the Saper Bo Kol Halayla. Meaning, having the Tam Matzah B'Peinu, or Tam Pesach B'Peinu, Pesach Afikoman Bizman Habayis, Bizmanenu Matzah, Shehi HaMitzvah, will continue to talk about the Laila, this Leil Seder Kol Halayla, because the Inyan is the Mesaper, your Mesaper on the Lechem, Shon Ladvarim Harbe, and Bizman Habayis, the Ikr is on the Pesach, the Korban Pesach. So therefore, those are the things you want to have. That's the mitzvah, to have the Tam B'Pinu, to be able to remember, because I wanted it. Shenaskir mitoich tam naskir tamei mitzvahs in the Saber Boy Kol Halayla. Because our Ikr Takana is that everything should be around the matzah. Everything should be around the matzah or Korban Pesach. That's why Pesach l'teyavon, we don't eat beforehand, because this is the Ikr mitzvah. And we don't eat afterwards. Everything's the matzah, that. Everything's a Korban Pesach. And the Fizeh, I think that's, and we'll sign with this, the Diuk and the Rambam, what's the after Machadish? Emil the Sud, you can oichel kol mashu roitza, you can be shoyzel kol mashu roitza, because if the Ikr is all around the matzah, the Korban Pesach, dalet kezayis, so you might think, oh, that's all you can eat. You can't eat more. Maybe you can have a little charosis with it. But you can't eat more than these dvarim, because everything's around that. No. The Sudas Pesach, the Suda Lel Pesach, what we call Shulchan Aruch, in the Seder, the Haggadah, the Shulchan Aruch, that you can eat kol mashu roitza. The beginning, matzah, moror, korech, keneged Zecher lemikdash kehilo. The end, Afikoman, nisher tam matzah bepiv. Everything's around that. The sipur's around that. And in Mirza Hashem, with our kiyum ha-mitzvah, we should be Zecher. I don't want to say that should mevatel a mitzvah, but the mitzvah should be mekuyim, the ikr takana. The Chazal wanted was not for the matzah should be nisher bepiv, but we should be Zecher to the bias, and we should be oichel min azvachim, or min apsachim, and we should be Zecher to be mekayim the mitzvah the way it should be bizman habayis, that we should have tamat, not only tam matzah b'pinu, but the ikr should be the tam korban pesach b'pinu shehi. That will be the mitzvah b'mei b'yameinu. Amen.